when Keanu Reeves noticed a frail girl clutching a handmade sign outside a glamorous Los Angeles restaurant. He thought it was just another ordinary evening. But what began as a simple act of kindness turned into a life-changing journey, one that would reveal heartbreaking truths, test the limits of compassion, and remind us all that even the smallest spark of hope can reignite a life. Little does he know. The young girl is seeking help not only for herself, but also for a small life that depends on her. A sick puppy who holds the last pieces of his broken family. What happens next will bring you to tears and restore your faith in humanity. As Keanu Reeves stepped out of the luxurious restaurant, the cool Los Angeles night wrapped around him, glittering with city lights reflected on rain-dampened streets. The sounds of laughter and conversation from the upscale crowd faded into the background as his gaze landed on a girl sitting on the sidewalk. Her worn-out clothes and tired, pale face told a story of hardship far removed from the glamour surrounding them. She held a handmade sign, her hands trembling as she glanced up at the passers-by who avoided her like a shadow in the night. Something about her stopped Keanu in his tracks. Was it the determination in her eyes despite her fragile frame? Or the silent plea for help that seemed to hang in the air around her? Whatever it was, it drew him closer, like a thread pulling him into her world. He crouched down, his voice gentle, almost hesitant. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, startled by the unexpected kindness. Her voice was barely a whisper. I need help, please." Before we uncover what happened next, a story that shook Keanu to his core and inspired millions around the globe, let me connect with you. My amazing viewers, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever felt that indescribable bond with an animal that changed your life, hit that like button. This story might just remind you of the miracles that love and compassion can bring. What Keanu discovered in the moments that followed would change not just her life but his as well. The girl's desperate plea wasn't for herself but for a life far smaller, yet infinitely precious. And so began a journey of hope, heartbreak, and healing that you won't forget. The chill of the night air brushed against Keanu Reeves as he crouched down to meet the girl's eyes. For a moment, the bustling city seemed to blur, leaving just the two of them in that quiet, fragile space. She looked no older than 14, her face gaunt and pale, framed by strands of unkempt hair that fell over her forehead. Her fingers clutched a small, hand-scrawled sign, trembling slightly as if the weight of her words was too much to bear. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked, his voice calm and measured, the way one might speak to a frightened animal. The girl flinched, startled by his question. She looked away, her gaze darting to the ground as if searching for something invisible. I just need help," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not for me." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with something unspoken. Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying her. He saw more than just the torn clothes and the hollow cheeks. There was a glint in her eyes, fear, yes, but also determination, a spark of resilience that refused to be extinguished. "Not for you?" he echoed gently. "Then who is it for?" The girl hesitated, her grip on the sign tightening. She shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. I can't say. You wouldn't understand." Keanu leaned back slightly, giving her space. "Try me," he said, his tone soft but resolute. "You'd be surprised what I can understand." She glanced up, her eyes shimmering with uncertainty, then quickly looked away again. Silence fell between them, the noise of the city muffled as if the world itself had paused to listen. Keanu didn't push. He waited, patient and steady, letting her know he wasn't going anywhere. After what felt like an eternity, the girl finally spoke, her voice quivering. It's my puppy. His name is Lucky. He's all I have left." Her words tumbled out in a rush, as though she feared she'd lose the courage to say them if she hesitated. "He's sick. I think he's dying. I don't know what to do." The confession hit Keanu like a wave. There was something raw and unfiltered in her voice, a kind of heartbreak that no child should have to endure. He felt a pang of recognition, a memory stirring deep within him of loss, of helplessness, of holding on to something small and precious when the rest of the world seemed to slip away. "I'm so sorry," he said sincerely, "but you're doing the right thing, asking for help." She shook her head again, her voice rising in frustration. "But no one cares. They just walk by. I've been here for hours, and no one even looks at me." Her voice cracked, and she bit her lip to hold back tears. Keanu's heart ached at her words. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to scream for help in silence and wonder if anyone would ever hear. Gently, he said, "Well, I see you, and I care." The girl looked up, her guarded expression softening ever so slightly. "Why?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. Keanu smiled faintly. "Because I've been where you are. Not exactly the same, but close enough to know how hard it can be. And I know how much it means when someone stops to listen." She blinked, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she simply stared at him, as though trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered, "He's all I have left of them, my parents. They died in a car accident last year. I live with my uncle now, but he doesn't care about Lucky. He said he's just a burden. I had to hide him." Her voice broke, and she wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. "You've been through so much," he said softly. "And you've done so much for Lucky already. That takes real strength." Her face twisted with doubt. "But it's not enough. He's so weak, and I don't have money for a vet. I've been trying to save him, but I think I'm losing him." Keanu reached out slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady. "You're not losing him. Not yet. And you're not alone in this anymore. We'll figure it out together. Okay?" For the first time, the girl's defenses seemed to crumble. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay," she whispered. Keanu gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Let's start with something simple," he said, standing and offering her his hand. "How about we get you something warm to eat? We'll figure out the rest after." She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took his hand. As they walked toward a small diner across the street, Keanu glanced back at her, his heart swelling with a mix of sadness and determination. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. The warm glow of the small diner was a welcome reprieve from the cold, damp streets outside. Keanu held the door open for the girl, who stepped in hesitantly, clutching her backpack as though it contained everything she owned. The hum of quiet chatter and the soft clinking of cutlery created a comforting background, a stark contrast to the chaos of the world she had left behind. Keanu led her to a corner booth, gesturing for her to sit before sliding into the seat across from her. "What's your name?" he asked gently, as a waitress approached with menus. "Lily," she replied quietly, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. Keanu smiled. "That's a beautiful name, Lily. Now, let's get you something warm to eat. What do you like?" She hesitated, glancing at the menu as though it was written in a language she didn't understand. "Anything's fine," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Keanu nodded to the waitress. "2 hot chocolates and 2 grilled cheese sandwiches. Please." He turned back to Lily, his gaze steady and reassuring. "You've had a long day. Let's start with something simple." As they waited for their food, Lily sat stiffly, her shoulders hunched as though bracing for something to go wrong. Keanu noticed her eyes darting around the room, never resting on one spot for too long. "You're safe here," he said softly. "No one's going to bother you." She looked up at him, her expression skeptical but grateful. "I'm not used to this," she admitted, gesturing vaguely at the diner. "People don't usually stop to help. Most of them just walk by like I don't exist." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I get it," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Sometimes, it feels like the world's too busy to notice what's right in front of them. But that doesn't mean you're invisible. And it doesn't mean you don't matter. Lily blinked, her lips pressing into a thin line as though she was trying to hold back tears. The waitress returned, setting steaming mugs of hot chocolate in front of them. Lily wrapped her hands around her cup, soaking in the warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Keanu offered her a kind smile. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad we ran into each other tonight." As the food arrived, Lily took cautious bites of her sandwich, as if savoring each one. Keanu let her eat in peace for a moment before gently steering the conversation back to her. "You said earlier that Lucky is all you have left," he began. "Can you tell me more about him?" Lily's face softened at the mention of her puppy, the first hint of a smile breaking through her guarded expression. "Lucky was a gift from my parents," she said, her voice steadying. "He showed up at our doorstep one rainy night, just before my birthday. My mom said he was a little miracle, like he knew we needed him." Keanu nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Sounds like he's pretty special." "He is," Lily said, her smile fading. "After my parents, after the accident, Lucky was the only thing that kept me going. He'd curl up next to me at night when I couldn't sleep. He'd lick my face when I cried. He made everything feel less lonely." Keanu's chest tightened at her words. He could see the depth of her bond with Lucky, how much the little dog represented love, family, and hope. "You're lucky to have him," he said gently. "And it sounds like he's lucky to have you, too." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I tried to take care of him the way my mom would have," she said, her voice breaking. "She was a vet. She taught me so much about animals, how to look for signs, what to do when they're sick. But now," she trailed off, her gaze dropping to the table, "now I don't have what I need to help him, and I don't know if I can." Keanu reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "You've done more than most people would, Lily," he said firmly. "You've given Lucky love, and that's the most important thing. The rest? We'll figure that out together." Lily looked up at him, her expression a mix of doubt and fragile hope. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Keanu paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because I know what it's like to feel lost," he said. "To feel like the whole world is moving on without you. And I know how much it helps when someone stops and says, 'I see you. I'm here. You deserve that.' Lily, Lucky does, too." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension that had gripped her since they met beginning to ease. "I hid him," she admitted after a moment. "My uncle wanted to get rid of him. He said it was too much trouble to keep a dog. So I took Lucky and found a place for him to stay. But now he's sick, and I don't know what to do." Keanu's jaw tightened, his protective instincts kicking in. "Where is he now?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. "In an alley," she said hesitantly. "I wrapped him in a blanket to keep him warm, but he hasn't been eating. And he's so weak." Keanu nodded, his mind already racing with solutions. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "First, we'll make sure you finish your meal. Then, you'll show me where Lucky is. We'll get him the help he needs. I promise." Lily stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You'd really do that? For me?" Keanu smiled softly. "For you. And for Lucky. You're not alone in this anymore." For the first time that night, Lily let out a small, shaky breath of relief. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, she wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. The night air felt colder as Keanu and Lily made their way through the dimly lit streets. Lily clutched her backpack tightly, her small frame shivering under her thin jacket. Keanu walked beside her, his presence steady and protective, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone in this daunting moment. He's just up ahead, Lily said softly, pointing toward a narrow alleyway partially hidden between two buildings. Her voice trembled, whether from the cold or her fear for Lucky. Keanu couldn't tell. As they turned the corner, the faint sound of whimpering reached their ears. Lily quickened her steps, her eyes scanning the dark until they landed on a small bundle tucked beneath a worn blanket near a stack of old crates. "Lucky!" she called out, her voice breaking with a mix of relief and desperation. She dropped to her knees beside the blanket, gently pulling it back to reveal a tiny, trembling puppy. Lucky's once shiny coat was dull, and his small frame looked far too frail. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of Lily's voice, letting out a weak, pitiful whine as she cradled him in her arms. Keanu crouched beside her, his heart sinking at the sight. Lucky barely moved, his breathing shallow and labored. "He's so cold," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to keep him warm, but it's not enough. I don't know what else to do." Keanu placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've done everything you could," he said softly. "You kept him safe when no one else would. But now it's time for someone else to step in and help." Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Do you think he'll be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's all I have left. Can't lose him." "Too." Keanu's chest tightened at the raw pain in her words. He reached out, gently stroking Lucky's head. The puppy let out another faint whimper, his tiny body trembling in Lily's arms. "We're not going to lose him," Keanu said firmly. "I promise. But we need to get him to a vet right away." Lily hesitated, her grip on Lucky tightening. What if it's too late?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Keanu met her gaze, his expression steady and resolute. "It's not too late," he said. "Lucky is still fighting, and so are we. We're going to do everything we can to help him." Lily nodded, wiping at her tears with her sleeve. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling but filled with a newfound determination. "Let's go." Keanu carefully took Lucky from her arms, cradling the small, fragile puppy against his chest. The tiny warmth of Lucky's body was barely noticeable, a stark reminder of how critical the situation was. "Come on," Keanu said, his voice gentle but urgent. "I'll call a cab." They hurried back to the main street, where Keanu flagged down a taxi. The driver glanced at them with curiosity but said nothing as Keanu climbed in, Lily following close behind. "To the nearest 24-hour veterinary clinic, please," Keanu said, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. The ride felt agonizingly long, the silence broken only by the occasional whimper from Lucky. Lily sat close to Keanu, her hands clasped tightly together as she stared at the tiny bundle in his arms. Keanu glanced down at Lucky, his heart aching at the thought of how much this little dog meant to the girl beside him. When they arrived at the clinic, a receptionist immediately noticed their urgency and called for a vet. Within moments, Lucky was whisked away into an exam room, leaving Lily and Keanu in the waiting area. Lily's eyes never left the door Lucky had disappeared through, her small hands gripping the edge of her chair. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they can't help him?" Keanu leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. "You've done the hardest part already," he said. "You didn't give up on him, even when things seemed impossible. That kind of love and determination makes all the difference." Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "You really think he'll make it?" Keanu nodded firmly. "I believe in him, and I believe in you." Just then, the vet returned, her expression serious but not without hope. "Lucky is very weak," she began. "He has an infection and is severely dehydrated. But we've started treatment. He's a fighter, and if he responds well in the next 24 hours, I think he has a good chance." Lily let out a shaky breath, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The vet smiled gently. He's lucky to have someone who loves him as much as you do, she said before turning to Keanu. And someone willing to step in and help when it's needed most. Keanu reached out, squeezing Lily's hand. See? He said, his voice soft but confident. He's going to be okay. We'll make sure of it. Lily nodded, her grip on his hand tightening as relief and hope washed over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world on her own. And for Lucky, his tiny life now held a spark of hope, fueled by the love and determination of the two people who refused to give up on him. The soft hum of machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the small veterinary clinic. Lily sat stiffly in one of the waiting room chairs, her eyes fixed on the door that Lucky had disappeared behind moments ago. Her hands clutched the strap of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily in the air. Keanu sat beside her, his presence a quiet pillar of support. He glanced at her, noticing the way her shoulders hunched and how her lips quivered, as though she was silently pleading for strength. Lily, he said gently, he's in good hands now. The vet is going to do everything they can. She turned to him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. But what if it's not enough? She whispered. What if I lose him too? Keanu's heart ached at the raw pain in her voice. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees as he spoke. You've done so much for Lucky already. You gave him love. You protected him when no one else would. And you brought him here when he needed help the most. That's what matters. Lily, you're giving him a chance. And that's more than enough. A tear slid down her cheek as she nodded, though doubt lingered in her expression. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tissue, handing it to her. It's okay to be scared, he said softly. It just means you care. Before Lily could respond, the door to the exam room opened, and the vet stepped out. The young woman's face was calm but serious, her hands clasped together as she approached them. Lucky's stable for now, she began. He's severely dehydrated and has a bad infection, but we've started him on fluids and antibiotics. The next 24 hours will be critical. Lily inhaled sharply, clutching her chest as though trying to steady her racing heart. Is he going to make it? She asked, her voice trembling. The vet offered a reassuring smile. He's a fighter, she said, and he's lucky to have you. I've seen animals in worse shape make full recoveries because someone refused to give up on them. We'll keep monitoring him closely, and with some time and care, I think he has a good chance. Lily exhaled a shaky breath, her tears now flowing freely. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and steady. You hear that, Lily? Lucky's fighting, and we'll be right here, fighting with him. The vet gestured toward a small private room. You can stay here overnight if you'd like. I think having you close by will be good for both of you. Lily nodded quickly, her relief evident. Yes, please. I don't want him to feel like I've left him. Keanu stayed with her, the hours dragging on as they sat in the quiet room adjacent to Lucky's recovery area. The faint beep of machines monitoring the puppy's condition was a constant reminder of how fragile his life was. Lily spent most of the time staring at the small window that gave a glimpse into the room where Lucky lay on a soft blanket, his tiny body connected to tubes and wires. Keanu broke the silence, his voice low and steady. You know, when I was your age, I had a dog too. His name was Sam, and he was my best friend. Lily turned to him, her expression softening with curiosity. What happened to him? She asked. Keanu smiled faintly, the memory bittersweet. He got sick, just like Lucky. We didn't have much money, but my mom found a way to get him the help he needed. He pulled through, and we had a few more good years together. Losing him later was hard, but I'll never forget the joy he brought into my life. Lily's gaze dropped to her lap, her fingers tracing the worn edge of her backpack. I don't think I've ever had anything that brought me joy like that, except for Lucky. Keanu reached over, resting a comforting hand on hers. That's why we're here, Lily, to make sure you get to have many more moments of joy with him. And even after this, no matter what happens, you'll always have people who care about you. You're not alone. Her lips quivered, and she sniffled, wiping at her eyes. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You didn't have to do any of this. Keanu shook his head. You don't have to thank me. Sometimes, we meet people or animals that remind us what really matters. Lucky reminded me, and so did you. The night crept on, the clinic growing quieter as the world outside seemed to settle into sleep. Lily dozed off in the chair beside Keanu, her head resting against his shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Keanu stayed awake, keeping an eye on the small room where Lucky lay. His thoughts wandered to his own struggles, the moments when life felt impossibly heavy, and how acts of kindness, no matter how small, had pulled him back from the edge. As dawn broke, the vet returned with a warm smile. Lucky's responding well to the treatment, she said. His vitals are improving, and he's starting to regain some strength. He's not out of the woods yet, but this is a good sign. Lily stirred awake at the vet's voice, blinking groggily before her eyes widened with hope. Can I see him? She asked. The vet nodded. Just for a little while. He needs to rest. But I think seeing you will do him good. Lily and Keanu followed the vet into the small room where Lucky lay. The puppy's eyes fluttered open as Lily approached, and he let out a faint whimper, his tail giving a weak wag. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she knelt beside him, gently stroking his head. Hey, Lucky, she whispered. You're so strong. I'm so proud of you. Keanu watched the tender moment, his heart swelling with emotion. He knelt beside Lily, placing a comforting hand on her back. He's got a fighter spirit, he said with a smile. Just like you. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily smiled, a real, genuine smile. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and love, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, hope. And for Lucky, the tiny puppy who had been given a second chance, the future was beginning to look a little brighter. The morning light filtered through the windows of the clinic, casting a soft glow over the small recovery room. Lily sat on the edge of her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she waited for the vet to return. Her gaze flicked between the doorway and Lucky, who lay curled on a soft blanket, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The sight of him still fighting brought a bittersweet mixture of hope and fear that she couldn't shake. When the door finally opened, the vet entered with a warm, reassuring smile. I've got good news, she began, her voice gentle. Lucky made it through the night, and his vitals are improving steadily. The infection is responding well to the antibiotics, and he's regained some strength. He's not out of the woods yet, but he's on the right path. Lily's breath hitched, her hands flying to cover her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. He's going to be okay? She whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The vet nodded. It's going to take time and care, but yes, I believe he will be. Lily let out a sob, her shoulders shaking as relief washed over her. She turned to Keanu, her tears falling freely now. Thank you, she choked out, her voice thick with gratitude. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to him. Keanu crouched down beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You don't have to thank me, Lily, he said, his voice soft and steady. You're the one who never gave up on him. Lucky's here because of you. She shook her head, wiping at her tears with the sleeve of her jacket. But I couldn't have done it alone, she said. You believed in him when I was so scared I might lose him. You believed in me. Keanu smiled, his gaze warm and filled with understanding. Sometimes, we just need someone to remind us how strong we already are. And Lily, you're stronger than you know. As the vet gave instructions for Lucky's ongoing care, special food, medications, and lots of rest, Lily listened intently, nodding with determination. She made mental notes of every detail, determined to do everything in her power to help Lucky recover fully. Once the vet left, the room grew quiet again. Lily scooted her chair closer to Lucky's small bed, gently reaching out to stroke his fur. His eyes fluttered open at her touch, and his tail gave the faintest wag. A soft laugh escaped her lips, a sound that was more joy than she had felt in what seemed like forever. "You're so brave," she whispered to him. "I'm so proud of you, Lucky." Keanu watched the scene unfold, a sense of quiet admiration filling him. There was something remarkable about Lily, a resilience and depth of love that reminded him of his own struggles and the people who had helped him find his way. He pulled up a chair beside her, letting the silence settle comfortably between them. "Do you think he knows?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice breaking the stillness. She glanced at Keanu, her expression earnest. "Do you think Lucky knows how much I love him?" Keanu nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely," he said. "Animals have a way of feeling things we can't even put into words. Lucky knows you've been there for him every step of the way. He knows you're his family." Lily's eyes shimmered with emotion. "He's all I have left of my parents," she said softly. "When I look at him, feels like they're still here with me, like I'm not completely alone." Keanu's chest tightened at her words. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees as he spoke. "You're not alone, Lily. Not anymore. You've got Lucky, and you've got people who care about you, people who see how amazing you are." She looked at him, her expression a mix of vulnerability and gratitude. "You really think I'm amazing?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Keanu smiled. "I know you are," he said. "What you've done for Lucky, putting him first, fighting for him even when it felt impossible, that takes a kind of courage most people don't have. And it's something to be proud of." A faint smile broke across Lily's face, the first true smile Keanu had seen since they met. "I don't think I could have done it without you," she said. Keanu reached over, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're in this together, Lily," he said. "Lucky's going to get better, and so are you. One step at a time." The bond between them deepened in that moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. It was a connection forged through shared struggles, a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness and compassion could create light. For the first time, Lily felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. It wasn't just about Lucky's recovery anymore. It was about her own journey, about finding a path forward with the support of someone who believed in her. And as Lucky let out a soft, contented sigh, Lily knew she wasn't alone in that journey anymore. Together, they were moving towards something brighter. After leaving the clinic, Lily held Lucky gently in her arms, her heart filled with a mix of relief and apprehension. Keanu walked beside her, keeping a watchful eye on her. He could sense the tension growing in her small frame as they approached her uncle's house. "How do you feel about bringing Lucky home?" Keanu asked softly, trying to ease her nerves. Lily hesitated, clutching her backpack tightly. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "My uncle, he doesn't like Lucky. I had to hide him before. And now, what if he doesn't let him stay?" Keanu stopped, crouching slightly so he could meet her worried gaze. "Lily," he said firmly but kindly, "I promise, we'll figure this out. Lucky fought hard to survive, and now it's our turn to make sure he has a safe place. You're not in this alone." Lily nodded, though her fear was still evident. As they reached the small, weathered house, she took a deep breath before pushing the door open. The smell of stale coffee and the faint sound of a TV greeted them. Her uncle, a gruff man in his late 40s, looked up from his chair, his brow furrowing as his eyes landed on Lucky's carrier. "What's this?" he barked, his tone sharp. "I thought I told you. No pets in this house." Lily flinched, her grip tightening on the carrier. Before she could respond, Keanu stepped forward, his calm and composed demeanor cutting through the tension. "Sir," he began, his voice steady, I understand your concerns. Taking care of a dog can feel like a lot. But Lucky isn't just a pet to Lily. He's her family. He's all she has left of her parents. Her uncle crossed his arms, his expression hardening. And who's supposed to take care of it? I'm already doing more than enough. And I don't need another mouth to feed. Keanu nodded empathetically. I hear you, he said. Raising a child on your own is no small task. And adding a dog can feel overwhelming. But Lily has proven she's responsible. She's the one who got Lucky the help he needed. She's ready to take on this responsibility. And I'm here to make sure she has the support she needs. Her uncle's gaze shifted to Lily, who stood silently, clutching Lucky as though her life depended on it. Keanu continued, his tone softening. There's also a program I've contacted, an organization that helps kids like Lily learn about animal care. They provide resources, training, and even financial assistance if needed. This could be a turning point for her, a chance to grow and find purpose. There was a long pause as her uncle mulled over the words, his eyes flicking back and forth between Keanu and Lily. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. Fine, he muttered, waving a dismissive hand. But the dog stays out of my way, and if it gets too much, he's gone. Understood. Lily's eyes widened with disbelief, and she quickly nodded. Thank you, she whispered, her voice shaking with relief. I promise, I'll take care of him. You won't even notice he's here. Her uncle grunted in response, already turning his attention back to the TV. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder as they moved to her small bedroom to settle Lucky in. As Lily carefully laid Lucky down on a soft blanket in the corner of her room, Keanu watched her with quiet admiration. Despite the obstacles she faced, her love and determination for Lucky never wavered. Once Lucky was comfortably nestled in, Lily sat beside him, gently stroking his fur. I'll keep you safe, she whispered to the puppy. No one's going to take you away from me. Keanu pulled up a chair, sitting across from her. You did well, Lily, he said. Lucky's here because you stood up for him. That takes a lot of courage. Lily smiled faintly, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. What if it's not enough? She asked. What if something happens, and I can't take care of him? Keanu leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. That's why I'm here, he said. And that's why we're going to get you into that program I mentioned. It's not just about Lucky. It's about you, too. You've already shown how much you care and how capable you are. This program will help you learn even more and give you the tools you need to succeed. Lily's face brightened slightly, the spark of hope returning to her eyes. You really think I can do it? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. I don't think it, Keanu said with a smile. I know it. You've already proven you can handle tough situations. This is just the next step. For the first time in weeks, Lily felt a glimmer of excitement about the future. She glanced at Lucky, who was now sleeping soundly, and then back at Keanu. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Keanu leaned back, his smile warm and genuine. You're welcome, Lily. But don't forget, you're the one who made all of this possible. Lucky's recovery, the chance for a better future, it all started with you not giving up. That night, as Lily watched over Lucky, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't just about survival anymore. With Lucky by her side and Keanu's unwavering support, she finally felt like she had a future worth fighting for. A few weeks later, as the afternoon sun bathed the small suburban house in a warm glow, Lily stood at the front door with Lucky nestled in her arms. She glanced around the quiet neighborhood, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The house wasn't just a shelter, it was a fresh start, a place where she and Lucky could finally feel safe. Keanu had arranged everything. Through his connections, he had found a foster family passionate about animals and eager to provide Lily with a stable, nurturing environment. The family, a kind couple with a sprawling backyard and a soft spot for rescues, welcomed her and Lucky with open arms. Inside, Lucky wagged his tail as he explored the space, his tiny paws tapping against the wooden floors. Lily watched him with a tearful smile, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "You're going to love it here," she whispered to him. "We both are." Keanu stood nearby, leaning against the doorframe, a satisfied smile on his face. "You've come a long way, Lily," he said. "This is your moment to start over." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've done so much for us." Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "You're the one who did the hard part. You never gave up, and you made it here because of that. All I did was help you see what you were capable of." As the days turned into weeks, Lily settled into her new home. She joined the animal care program Keanu had recommended, spending her afternoons learning about veterinary science and caring for animals. Lucky became her constant companion, his once fragile body now strong and energetic. The bond between them only deepened, and Lily began to dream of becoming a veterinarian, just like her mother. Months later, Keanu received a handwritten letter from Lily. The envelope was decorated with small doodles of paw prints and hearts, and inside was a message that brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Keanu, I hope this letter finds you well. Lucky and I are doing great. He's healthy, happy, and more energetic than ever. I can't tell you how much it means to me to have a safe place to call home and a chance to follow my dreams. I've started volunteering at the animal shelter nearby, and every day I think of my mom and how proud she would be. None of this would have been possible without you. You believed in me when no one else did, and you gave me the chance to believe in myself. I'll never forget that. Thank you for showing me that there's still kindness in the world. You saved more than just Lucky's life, you saved mine too. With love and gratitude, Lily." Keanu folded the letter carefully, a quiet smile spreading across his face. He placed it in his journal, where he kept reminders of the moments that mattered most. Staring out the window, he thought about how a single act of compassion had created ripples far beyond what he could have imagined. Sometimes, life has a way of reminding us that even the smallest gestures, a warm meal, a reassuring word, or a helping hand can change everything. For Lily and Lucky, it had. And for Keanu, it was a reminder of the enduring power of kindness and the remarkable connections that can transform lives.